Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. Our first map here looks at the last 15 days of temperature anomalies across the United States. And across the Carolinas, we've favored more warmer days than cooler days, although bringing in sustained long-term heat hasn't been an issue. Where it has been an issue is in parts of the Mid-South, throughout the plains, and at times throughout the Corn Belt. Now, this morning, I'm actually recording up here in northern Wisconsin. I'm on a family vacation these 2 weeks, and the overnight low last night got down into the low 40s, so quite a contrast compared to what we've seen. But that's important to understand because what's driving the cooler weather through the Great Lakes represents a rather substantial change in the pattern. That pattern change is going to affect us in a big way in the Carolinas. Let me show what I'm talking about. You see, this map shows you in reds where there's been ridging over the last month. That's where the jet stream bulges to the north and brings with it heat and drier conditions. Where you see the blues, that represents troughs in the jet stream pattern, and that's where we typically get cooler and more inclement weather. So the jet stream throughout much of June has been blocked up into what we call an omega block somewhere here in and around the Aleutian Islands, but it's featured a trough of low pressure just off the west coast. So the flow has come in like this, run up over the top of a big ridge that's been parked somewhere in the plains toward the mid-south, and then it's kind of shut down here and moved farther to the south over the east at times. Now what I want to talk about is this right here. So there are several places across our planet that have semi-permanent pressure systems. And there's one commonly called the Hudson Low. There's another one called the Icelandic Low. There's the Aleutian Islands Low, which has been here. That's where they typically reside. We've not seen that this year. Instead, there's been a sizable ridge of high pressure where I put that X throughout much of June. That broke down and is continued to forecast to be broken down over the next couple of weeks. And that's changing this whole pattern across much of the eastern two-thirds of the United States, and we're going to cover it in just a few seconds. First, some other things I need to bring up to speed on. Here's our latest soil moisture map down to 16 inches. Now, when you look at this, what we see is throughout Texas, the lower Mississippi River Valley, from Alabama and Georgia straight through the Carolinas. There are places in here that over the last couple of weeks have gone into pretty quick and rapid onset drought development. Same thing through parts of the western Corn Belt. But where we had seen some drought develop in this part of the Corn Belt, weekend rains came through and just eliminated some of this near-term risk. But the map I just drew on here is your latest drought monitor. It was released last Thursday. We get an update of these every Thursday. They come out from the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. And what I'm concerned about is how we continue to see over in the southeast, including a big section of North Carolina, some very dry conditions. But I want to show you this. This is the weekend rainfall. All right. You notice how it's not been able to get over the mountains just yet. It's coming, but at this point, the front stalled out right here, and it's just not delivered moisture on the eastern side of the Appalachians. But this right in through here, this is some heavy rain on some of the most productive counties in terms of corn and soybean production. The storms were slower than anticipated. They delivered more rain than was anticipated. And this was really quite a big surprise for Illinois and parts of Iowa. But again, look for the holes. Those are the areas that I'm most concerned about. And sometimes it's easier to identify those holes by looking at a map that shows you percent of normal. Now the reds really pop out as the locations that have been quite dry. And you could probably spend 20 minutes just staring at this map, identifying those regions that are in stress. But what I want to point out here is that the upcoming forecast is going to help improve some of these drier areas, but it is also going to leave some of them much drier than they currently are. Our big question is, what do we get over here in parts of the southeast up through the Carolinas? And I do have overall good news about that. But you notice, as we just kind of zoom in here, the regional drought development that has taken place in the Carolinas, honestly, you go back to all my forecast videos, I would not have expected this. And the reason why is because we still have a La Niña going here. We've got warm water in the Atlantic. We've got the cooler water off the Baja here. And this whole setup says historically, we tend to not develop drought from the Gulf Coast up through the East Coast. That's just not typically what happens. Doesn't mean it can't. It's just not typical. And then when I see the cooler water here and then go look at how strong those trade winds are, I mean, I showed you maps like this in the middle of January when the La Niña was still really kicking and really strong. All of these blue-green colors from today through July the 11th represent where right here we have very strong trade winds. So this La Niña is outperforming all expectations. It is still quite strong, and it's really changing a lot of the tropical dynamics, and it's being influential on the Atlantic and on the Pacific. Now, if we take that information and just jump into the long range first, I'll come back to the short range in a second. I'm going to show you two forecasts. The first is the new week 3, week 4 forecast from the Climate Prediction Center. And if you just take a close look here, they are calling for, a better chance of us seeing more above average precipitation. But that going out from that time period of July 9th through the 22nd, they're not at this point calling for us to have any sort of drought redevelopment in this area. I'm going to combine that now with the latest update from the European model. And this is the full July outlook from the latest European runs. And it is quite wet from the southeast through New England. Very much above average in terms of precipitation. Now that's typical of a La Niña. And I'm telling you that our La Niña is quite strong. Why is this the case? Where is this coming from? Because in addition to seeing the wetter than average conditions, let's take a quick peek at the temperature forecast over that time period. And you do see here that near normal, but more than likely we're going to see some pretty warm days in here with this pattern. Meanwhile, just to make a point, much of the Central Plains, the Corn Belt, there's an area in through here that despite my more favorable near-term forecast, we've not eliminated the risk of drought redevelopment for example, in the Plains or Corn Belt going through the remainder of July and into August. That's what La Niña does. It always keeps the risk there should the pattern unfold into a big ridge in the midsection of the country. And you saw there are still pockets that are showing up drier in that forecast. But what about us? What about this side of the country? Well, in the near term, we have some activity going on in the Atlantic. The National Hurricane Center is watching a system that's just here, south of, where the Mississippi drains into the Gulf. They got a 20% chance of it developing, but I'm not worried about it developing into a tropical system. I'm actually more concerned about the moisture it could bring into parts of Texas. I'll show you that in a second. This next system, which we watched a lot last week, still has a 90% chance of developing into a system, which could get it a name. But the latest model forecast graphics, I'll show you in a second, take it straight into Central America. Turns out it's the third wave on the backside. The National Hurricane Center still got this one at a 20% chance of developing. But what you're really needing to pay attention to here is the trajectory. Let me show you. Here is this morning's model runs. Now, the first system, possibly doing that. The second system, which is here, forecast to come through Central America. It's the one that's on the backside that may possibly take that route. And you know how this works. Systems that come up like this tend to skirt along the coast and give us better moisture. Now, this is way far out there. I have no confidence in this occurring. I'm simply using the model guidance to reference where it could possibly go. So I don't want to remove that. What I think gives this some credibility is the behavior of the trade winds this week. The subtropical high, the Big Bermuda high, it's way over here. The trade wind flow to the south is strong. That's the tropical disturbance we're watching. This is the lead one. That's the one we're watching. And can you see how the flow, the steering currents could take it in this direction? Also notice this. See how the flow is doing like this a lot? That kind of setup tends to deliver stationary fronts into this area, which at times can give us better chances of rainfall. That's why I think that the longer range forecast of delivering better moisture is valid. So let's go take a look. Here is the latest update for the next 7 days in terms of total accumulated precipitation. Now you see where those stalled out boundaries are aiding with the precipitation here. Better than a ½ inch to maybe upwards of 1.5 inches is possible in this area. I'll show you the details in a second. But do take note of the places that we really see the wetter conditions. And here's where that tropical system may make that turn, delivering a lot of heavy rainfall to very dry parts of Texas. Note the eastern Corn Belt seeing improved rainfall chances. This section here of the plains getting into the western Corn Belt better. But there's going to be a big broad sector here in the Mid-South I'm still going to remain concerned about when we think nationally. Okay, our next forecast graphics come from the high-res NAM, and I want to show you what we're watching this morning. So at 10 a.m., the showers and storms are trying to come over the mountains. This is this morning on Monday. And you can see that throughout the day today, we've got chances for scattered storms. At this point, as I kind of rock back and forth over this evening, when you watch these storms move, from central North Carolina to the coast, the models are not, and there's no indication from the Storm Prediction Center that these are going to be severe, which is good news. So that front moves on through, but stalls out. This is 10 a.m. Tuesday. getting to Tuesday evening. And then you see how there's a shift? Now notice the moisture is not coming from the west, but it's coming here off the trades. So into Wednesday, our chances of showers and storms remains, but the flow pattern has changed as our next weak frontal boundary approaches. So if we kind of add all this up and show you the bigger features, watch, ready? You've seen the trades. Now let's come to the changes in the jet stream. As we play this forward through Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, these are the most important factors I'm seeing. I'll pause it here on Sunday morning. Okay, ridge over the Aleutian Islands, or south of it right there. Trough off the west coast. We've seen that a lot. But where the current ridge is being set up is now here across the United States, right along the Front Range. And the flow is now coming around a deep Hudson low. Now, if you go back to the beginning of the video, we talked about how that had not been there. So what does that do? That tends to give us flow that comes out of the northwest like this across the eastern Corn Belt. That gets over to the Appalachian Mountains and it meets trade winds. The net effect is better moisture right in through that area. So now that you've seen that pattern evolving here, let's go take a look at what it does. We've already seen this front slide through on Monday, so there it is. We then know that the pattern is going to shift out of southeast flow, giving us chances for storms through midweek. Seems like we go through the end of the week with most of North Carolina being drier. It's just going to be these convective pop-up storms, which we're very used to happening toward the end of the week. That's your 30% chance of storms you see every day in the forecast. So better chances of rain earlier in the week. They back off middle to late week, but then we've got another deep low. That's coming around that Hudson low right there on Saturday. And you see the front? As it slides toward us, our chances for rainfall this weekend start to pick up Saturday into Sunday. So more chances of rain coming through there. That front clears, but we still haven't erased the overall pattern going out into the 5th of July. So if I add all this up, you'll see there's the showers and storms today. Generally speaking, these storms are putting down, less than an inch of rain. Some locally heavier amounts. That's through Tuesday. Then scattered precip mainly stays south and in South Carolina and Georgia through the middle of the week. And then you notice, now watch, Friday going into Saturday, see where the next round comes in? It's got two components. It's coming up out of the southeast, and it's the front swiping through, which means when you just stretch this out to the 1 week totals, we're looking at some places picking up 1.5 inches to 2 inches of rainfall. And what I'm happy about is that's hitting the areas that have been dry. We need this moisture in a big way right now. Probability of getting 1 inch of rain. Take a look. This is the chances of getting more than 1 inch of rain through the next 10 days. We're over 90% here. So that's good. Week 2, same features exist. There's that Hudson low. It's just a little farther east. And that's why the week 2 precipitation pattern continues to paint. See this area I talked about from the Corn Belt to the East Coast with above average precipitation. Now that looks more like what I'd expect out of a La Niña, not like what we saw in June, I guess. So let's watch that carefully. Okay, temperatures. First map I want to show you is from April 1st, the growing degree day unit anomalies. Now this is a base 50, max 86 calculation, so that's a corn calculation. But you can see that generally speaking across most of North Carolina, we are above average on the accumulation of heat units. It's only along the north and in the mountains we have a couple of locations with some deficit. Notice the biggest deficits are here, northern plains back to the Pacific Northwest. Well, watch what the temperatures are doing now. So cooler air Monday into Tuesday. Yeah, we may not get into the 80s on Tuesday in central North Carolina. We could, but I like seeing that. That's Tuesday. Wednesday, the heat that was in the northwest today is now in the plains, 103 degrees in parts of Nebraska, triple digits in South Dakota. We're still cool. That warmer air gets here later in the week. There's Thursday's highs getting into Friday and Saturday. So we're going to slide into the 4th of July weekend with a warmer finish to the week overall. Now, where do the temperatures go from there? 5-day sliding window of temperatures. So watch this as we play this out here, getting out to that day 5 through 10 time period. There it is. We don't see much in the way of sustained heat for us in the Carolinas. But going into that first full week of July and then past that into the second full week of July, now we start to see where the heat rebuilds. And you see that pattern we talked about. Troughs over the west, ridging here. That Hudson Bay trough still sits there. So it's this area that goes back over with the greater risk of being hotter than normal. It's not necessarily over us. So that's an important part of this temperature pattern. One last thing to finish up with here. I'm going to give you a little bit of an update on the European heat wave, because over the next 10 days, it's really staying in Central Europe, right in through here. This would be Ukraine. So more storms east, cooler west. I got that backward, I'm sorry. More storms west, cooler east, but right in Central Europe, very, very hot. Here's the precip pattern. See the storms coming out of France and Germany, but Ukraine, Romania, Belarus, Poland, getting up here into the Russian wheat belt, dry. And that, I think, could be an important part of maybe a global news story with respect to weather we should keep an eye on. I'll stop it there. Have a good rest of your week. I will talk to you next week on Tuesday. I'm going to spend the 4th of July with my family. I hope you get to do the same. Talk to you soon. Thanks.